What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Tinted Visors podcast. Coming right back at you here with episode 34. Today, we'll just be wrapping up our division outlooks with the Metro division. That being said, let's get it going.
Jumping straight into card of the day. We're going to go off theme, not with the Metro Division, but with the Atlantic, another Tampa Bay card, a different player this time around. We're going to go with the Braden Point World Juniors patch auto, numbered 80 of 125. Just a hint of double colored there, red and gold. Or the C for that 2016 team. Such a loaded roster they had. But Braden Point is going to need to step up here for Tampa with the loss of Steven Stamkos. I assume he's going to get an A this season. That would be really exciting for him. But I expect a big year out of Braden Point, and that's my card of the day.
Yeah, it's a sweet card. We've talked about the Team Canada sets before and how fun they are to collect when you can pick up some superstar players with some pretty cool patch autos for pretty cheap because they're the Team Canada set. So my card, I'm also off theme. Didn't really tell Kenny we're packing a little bit of heat here. It's a brand new card. We have a 2021 SP Authentic Quinn Hughes limited autograph. That is Kenny's first look at the card. It's a PSA 10 with an auto 10 as well. It was a birthday present from my dad, so shout out to my dad for picking this beauty up for me. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It has a pop of 3. The limited autos are probably pretty hard to find in SP Authentic. So yeah, the gold behind the blue auto with the blue jersey on just really pops. Instantly one of my favorite cards in my collection, and I'm so stoked to have this in my possession.
Continuing with the trend, going right into the content, we're going to start with the bottom up, and we're going to do with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Last in the Metro Division, it's starting to become a trend every year, it seems like, for them. $17 million in cap space. They've got Marchenko, Sillinger, and Kent Johnson, all as RFAs, yet to sign. Can't imagine that takes up much of the full cap of that full 17. Most of them probably just 1 or 2 years prove it deals. Big change that they brought in was Sean Monahan, 4 years at $5.5 million. But that's the only real signing and a team for a team that needed a lot of change and a lot of new pieces and stronger pieces. They really didn't go out and do much. But Caden, what do you think of the signing and what do you think of this Columbus roster?
Yeah, after another really bad season from Columbus last year, a lot of change, was being called for, and they didn't really bring it. They're looking for some bounce backs from some key guys. Looking at Johnny Gaudreau, I think that Sean Monahan signing will help him quite a bit. They get the first line center. They have the chemistry from their time in Calgary together. I think Gaudreau can have a bounce back year next year. And also look at Kent Johnson next year to have a bounce back year. He was the number 5 pick in the 2021 draft. He's only 21. Didn't really live up to expectations last year, only played in 42 games and only had 16 points. So look for him to stick at the NHL level next year and hopefully produce. This Blue Jackets team is young with a lot of talent, so things are looking up, but I think contention is still a few years away.
Yeah, you talk about them being young, and they got a lot of prospects who I'd like to see get some NHL time. But there's just a lot of roster pieces that are signed long term that are kind of in the way. You look at a guy like Patrick Laine, seeming to be on his way out, but he's got an $8.7 million cap hit. Even Elvis in net, he's looking like he's on his way out, but he's still a roster piece. Then that whole defensive core, obviously Werenski, not a problem with him, but Damon Severson, long-term contract. Branson's got a big cap hit. And you just want to free up that roster spot for a guy like Yurchek to take a big step, maybe Matejchuk to come in and claim a roster spot. But when they have these guys signed long-term, big cap, it's hard to sort of bring that young core in. So as long as those contracts are there, I can't really see them contending. I would give them 2 to 3 years for the playoffs, and then after that, it's going to be another 2 or 3 years, so 4 or 5 years total for them to be contending for any sort of Stanley Cup. Next up on the list, and a surprising finish in the second last place, is the New Jersey Devils. Around $5 million left in cap space. They got Dawson Mercer to sign as their RFA. Either whether it's long-term or a short-term deal, it's going to eat away at pretty much all that cap space, and they might even have to move out some roster pieces in order to sign him long-term. But they brought in a few guys. Stefan Nason, Tomas Tatar comes back, Paul Cotter in that Alexander Holtz trade. Brendan Dillon signs 3x4, and then the big signing, Brett Pesce, 6 years at $5.5 million. Some big changes in New Jersey. Caden, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I love the offseason for the Devils. Their obvious weak point was a goaltender. They addressed that. They went out and got Markstrom for, I think a very fair price. And yeah, so this Devils team, there's a couple things they need to go right. They need to stay healthy. Looking at Dougie Hamilton, who, hasn't had a healthy season in quite some time. My only question mark with this Devils team is Simon Nemec. He was, there's no path for him really to a top four role, considering they just brought Brett Pesce in. And if Dougie Hamilton can stay healthy, those are the two right shot defensemen that he can't really leap on the depth chart. So he's kind of banished to the top 6 minutes. I hope he'll be able to develop still, but it's not looking great. I would, maybe like to see the Devils explore a trade with Nemec to improve their roster, get a player who can play a bigger role, and, help this team succeed this year.
Yeah, I thought he could sort of crawl his way into the top four, but after those signings, it's looking like, bottom pair minutes for him. Some bounce back candidates for them. I think Timo Meyer needs to sort of get back to that 30, 40 goal range. Additionally, Andre Palat, he gets paid a lot of money. He's got to live up to that contract. Talk about Dougie Hamilton needing to be healthy all year. Same with Jack Hughes, such an amazing player. But, he's been missing games past couple seasons. If they can get him for full 82, I think this team can really contend. That's why I got them in the playoffs for next season. I think they have a really good mix. I keep saying it of players in their prime, like Heischer, like Hughes, like Hamilton, and players on their ELCs, sort of bringing that depth, like Luke Hughes, the brother, and Simon Nemec. I think they can contend within the next 1 or 2 years, but they're playoff bound for sure.
Kenny, last year we saw, a pretty stacked Metro division with the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. How high can you see the Devils finishing this year? The Canes got weaker, the Rangers still the Rangers, but is there any world where the Devils can contend for that one seed in the Metro?
We'll get into the Rangers. I think there are a little more offseason moves that they need to make before they can start the season. I think the Devils can finish as high as two. I do think Carolina Hurricanes, they did make some changes, and I don't think it was for the better. So I could see them dropping still in the playoff spot, 3 or 4 maybe. Um, I do think the Rangers maintain that one seed, so I would see the New Jersey Devils finishing in the two spot. Again, with healthy seasons from all players and some bounce backs from a few others, they could be really dangerous going into the season. In the sixth seed in the Metro Division, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. Strong start to the season, but they ended up missing out on the playoffs once again. They got negative cap space right now, and that's a huge part due to the Kevin Hayes contract, Cam Atkinson buyout, and the Tony DeAngelo buyout. So a lot of money tied up, buried that they can't use. No real significant free agent signings. They're just trying to get better within, led by John Tortorella. Caden, what do you think of this Philadelphia Flyers roster?
To be honest, I'm not a huge fan. There's no real elite talent on this team up front. Like, yes, you have your guys like Travis Konechny, Sean Couturier, Joel Farabee, these, solid forwards, but I think they're lacking a bit of star power. They do have Matvey Michkov on the way. It's going to be a very exciting piece to add to this forward core, so hopefully he can be that star that they're missing. But to me, they're just extremely mediocre, not bad enough to tank, and, I don't think quite good enough to really make a run in the playoffs. I think best case scenario they could squeak in, but I can't see them being anything more than a first round exit this year.
Travis Sanheim and Cam York both had some pretty solid years in the back end. And you do talk about not having really star players, but Owen Tippett did have some highlight reel goals. He did get some pretty good production this season from him. So I would like to see him continue that trend. One question for me is just in net. They lost Carter Hart, obviously, during the season last year. They brought in Fedotov. They also have Erison. Not really sure who's going to take the starter role there. I would assume they give it to Fedotov at the beginning. But we don't know what he's like in the NHL full time. So we're going to see what happens there. And that's just the biggest uncertainty I have for the Philadelphia Flyers. The last team in the Metro to miss out on the playoffs, we have the Pittsburgh Penguins. $3.5 million cap space. They brought in Kevin Hayes and Matt Grzelcyk to solve that problem. Caden, was it enough? Where do you see this team finishing the season?
It's tough, they do have a ton of aging veterans on their team, as we've mentioned before. I don't think it's enough to get this team in the playoffs. Crosby tried dragging them there last year just to come up short. He's not getting any younger, and neither is this core. Letang, Malkin, their best days are behind them. I think, Pittsburgh is just going to let them retire as Penguins and just kind of slowly ride off into the sunset with their 3 Stanley Cups. It's tough to see this team contending. So yeah, I think just the aftermath of all those years of contention in the Stanley Cups and building around Crosby, I think it's finally becoming a reality. Props to them. They're doing their best to build around Crosby, and they're not, not giving him away, not trading him, and not, hanging him high and dry. So I like what Pittsburgh's doing. I just don't think it's enough to make the playoffs this season.
Yeah, definitely not throwing in the towel, but it's nowhere near a playoff team. You look at some of the players, Crosby, 94 points last season, just an ageless wonder. Bunting, pretty solid year, 55 points. He was a pretty good return in that Gensel trade, but Raquel's only got 37 points. Carlson, 56 points, which is it's good for a defenseman, but after 100 points the year before, it's just not what you wanted to bring into that roster. You talk about, the aging core. They're not even trying to get younger either. They keep trading away first round picks. Not much prospects in their prospect pool. Braden Yeager is pretty exciting, so maybe he could crack the roster. But, looking at the Penguins roster, I just can't see this team making the playoffs. And if they're not making the playoffs, I can't see them contending anytime soon until a rebuild is fully committed to. Speaking of not throwing in the towel, we have the Washington Capitals up next in the wild card two position, and I like what they did this offseason. Brought in a plethora of guys: Jacob Chikrin, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Matt Roy, Taylor Radish, Logan Thompson, and Andrew Mangiapane. You look at that roster now compared to last season. I mean, their top four is John Carlson, Matt Roy, Jacob Chikrin, and Rasmus Sandin. That's a solid top four. You add Logan Thompson to replace Darcy Kemper. I'm really liking how this team looks. Considering the goal differential they went into the playoffs with, I think it was one of the worst all time of a playoff team. I think that's really going to help them. Ovechkin had a really strong second half of the season, and Dylan Strome had a really good strong season as well. I think all they need is a big bounce back from Pierre-Luc Dubois, maybe Tom Wilson to get a few more points. But I'm liking what this team did this offseason, and I could see them going with for another wildcard spot, maybe even squeak into a three seed position in the Metro.
Yeah, and very similar to the Penguins, they're building around Ovi. They're, not throwing in the towel, like you said. But with the moves they made, specifically the Pierre Luc Dubois one, the repercussions, if it doesn't go right, are massive. Because before, the repercussions were just, a few years in the dark of rebuilding, being a bottom feeder team. But now with that contract, if it doesn't work out with Pierre Luc Dubois, that contract, it's just kicking in. It's 7 years, Kenny, at 8.5 million. It is a huge risk, but I do love it moving on from Kemper because you have Lindgren and then bringing in Thompson to form a very solid tandem and bringing in Pierre-Luc Dubois, who still has the potential to be a number one center for you. I love the moves from the Caps. They rolled the dice. They're not scared of being aggressive. And, I'm really looking forward to their season this year.
Honestly, I'm pretty confident in Pierre-Luc Dubois having a bounce back season. I think this was kind of a wake up call after getting moved out from LA, just kind of getting him to sort of reboot and sort of rebuild his career. I would go even as far as saying maybe he could get 60 to 65 points this upcoming season. That is my hot take for Pierre-Luc Dubois. But I think they've done a really nice job of even getting better within. They drafted a lot of great young players. I would like to see Ryan Leonard get into a few games near the end of the season after his college year wraps up. I'd love to see Miroshnichenko get into some games, maybe crack, top nine, top 6 minutes. Because I think, unlike Pittsburgh, I think they've done a really good job in bringing in some younger players to the draft. And I think if they could add those guys, have them get some production on their ELCs, it would give them a lot of depth scoring going into a potential playoff series.
So, talk about a playoff series, Kenny. Do you have Washington making the playoffs as it stands right now?
I do, and because I just don't see who the fourth team in this division would be, like I said earlier, it would be the Rangers, New Jersey, and Carolina rounding out that top three. And I just don't have confidence in Pittsburgh or the Islanders. I don't really see Philadelphia or Columbus making a big leap forward, and that just leaves Washington. Unless the Atlantic takes five teams, I could see Washington squeaking into that top four and potentially even squeaking into a top three position. Into the three seed, the New York Islanders, home of your former favorite player, Bo Horvat. They added Anthony Duclair in the offseason, really rounding out that top six forward core. How do you see the Islanders finishing? And give me a hot take on Bo Horvat and his point production this season.
Oof, hot take, Kenny. I'm all about it with Bo Horvat. I love that guy. So yeah, I love the moves the Islanders made this off season, bringing in Duclair and very top heavy team. He's gonna play on a line with Barzell and Horvat, likely to start the year. But they could always mix them up, throw them up and down the lineup, and try to spark some other lines, some other production. But this is an aging Islanders squad. They do have some younger pieces like Ilya Sorokin and Noah Dobson, respectively. Yeah, I don't know how this Islander team is going to perform. I don't think they're going to be good enough to grab that 3 seed in the Metro again, although it is, a slightly weaker division. But I could see teams like the Devils, like the Capitals, both leapfrogging them. But yeah, to me, I think Bo Horvat, I think the hot take, I think Bo Horvat with a full year of Barzell and Duclair, I think he pots 45 goals. Might be a little bit too hot, but the stove is hot. We're going with an extremely hot take and, looking forward to seeing him play next year.
Honestly, that could be very, very likely. I would love to see the Islanders really let the forwards free and just let them get as many points and really rack up the scoring totals. Looking at the top, like the starting line, it's not a bad team. You have Duclair, Horvat, and Barzell. Then you got Dobson and either Pelech or Pulak on that back end, and Sorokin in net. Like that starting six is probably one of the best in the division. It's just the depth that's lacking. Love to see Wallstrom take a step forward, even Romanov. Both those guys, former top prospects, just haven't really broken out in the league. But speaking of Sorokin and Varlamov, how do you think this tandem will do for the Islanders? They had a bit of an off season, an off year last year, and they would love to see them bounce back. But what do you think of Sorokin? Is he a potential Vezina winner this year?
Yeah, I think you could for sure call him a dark horse Vesna winner this year. He definitely needs to bounce back. Varlamov looked great last year, but he isn't getting any younger. I still think, he can be serviceable in that tandem, and I think this tandem has the potential to be one of the best in the league again. And they could really backstop the Isles to, a very solid regular season, and, who knows, maybe another playoff run in store for the Isles.
And now to the final two. In the second place, my preseason cup pick, still a very solid team. It's the Carolina Hurricanes. Around 14 mil in cap space, but I think Natchez and Jarvis will eat that all up come September 1st or October 1st, whenever first game of the season is. They added a few depth forward pieces in Roslovic and Carrier, but they made the biggest changes was the blue line, bringing in Sean Walker at a very reasonable $3.6 million cap hit and Shane Gostisbehere at another reasonable $3.2 million contract. Obviously it did hurt to lose both Pesci and Shea, but I do like the replacements they did bring in. Overall, I think they got a little bit worse. That's why I do think they could slide down to the 3 seed. And one big uncertainty for me is just the goaltending. Freddie Anderson has been healthy for a long time. He is good when he is in the lineup, but they could be relying on Kochetkov a lot this year, and I just don't know if he is a true starter yet in this early in his career.
Yeah, they did lose a ton of depth on that blue line, but bringing in Ghost and bringing in Sean Walker for, with some term, you see the dollar value at 3.6, you'd expect it to be, a 1 year, a 2 year deal, but the deal has 5 years to it, so I absolutely love that. And then, yeah, looking at the forward core, they're going to need a guy like Martin Necas to step up. And, this Carolina team is still very dangerous. Their goaltenders are more than capable with Kochetkov and Anderson. Could be a little inconsistent at times, and, they are unpredictable. But yeah, I could see this Carolina Hurricanes team, finishing as high as the 1 seed in the Metro and, making another playoff run.
Do you think so? You think their window is still open? Do you think they could challenge for the Stanley Cup?
I think it's gonna be tough for them to challenge for the cup, but I think they're a very solid playoff team and they could very well make some noise if they make it in. With the young guys they have, Aho, in his prime, and Jarvis, Natchez, some younger guys looking to take another step. I think they can be dangerous come April.
And finally, the President's Trophy winners, the New York Rangers, had a very, very good start to the playoffs, going 7-0, and then ultimately falling short in the conference finals to the Florida Panthers. $5 million in cap space right now. They still have Brian Lindgren to sign as an RFA, and I would believe that he takes even more than that. I mean, he is a very, very good shot blocking defenseman. I could see him getting $6-7 million on his deal, so they would have to move out some players in order to do that. They brought in Riley Smith, 40 points with Pittsburgh, and then a cup 2 years ago with Vegas, so he does have some experience there. Still a really good, strong roster. Panarin, great year last year. Same with Vinny Trocheck and Adam Fox. One thing for me is Zibanejad. I would have liked to see a little more goal scoring out of him. I know he is a 35, 40 capable goal scorer. He only had 26 last year. And then biggest news, Lafreniere finally breaks out 57 points, and he's got 1 year left at $2.3 million. Caden, is this team still good enough to finish first in the Metro?
Absolutely. I think this Rangers team is absolutely lethal. They are star studded top to bottom, and the emergence of Alexis Lafreniere really just ups the ante with this team. They have a very solid top six elite. You can even call their top nine extremely elite. Even a guy like Vinny Trocheck, kind of underappreciated on this, loaded Rangers team, but he's producing and he's very solid. You look at the blue line; they are paying Jacob Trouba $8 million, which is a little much for their captain. And considering he only really makes headlines for flying elbows and some atrocious hits. But yeah, backed by one of the best tandems in the league in Jonathan Quick and Igor Shesterkin, this Rangers team has the potential to absolutely run it back, and I could very easily see them winning the President's Trophy yet again this year.
Yeah, you talk about Jacob Trouba, and he actually nixed a deal to the Red Wings. Just wasn't, he has them no move, so he didn't want to go there. I think it had to do with what his wife is doing right now in her career. and didn't want to jeopardize that moving out of New York. And fair play to him. I mean, they signed him to the no move clause. So you can't give Jacob Trouba any flack for taking advantage of what was given to him. But it really, really does handicap them, especially when you look at Lindgren, who's not signed right now, and when you look at Lafreniere, who needs a new deal after next season. Because $8 million for a guy like Trouba, I think it's like 8.5 for a guy like Zibanejad. It's a lot of money tied up. Even Shesterkin is coming up after this season. This roster would look insanely different this time next year.
So you talk about expiring deals, Kenny. Is this season the best chance for the Rangers to win the cup?
I think so. Yeah, to have Shesterkin making, I think it's just around $6 million. That is an absolute steal. Everyone else, I would say, is pretty much fairly paid. You talk about Fox, talk about Panarin. They are high cap hits, but they are very productive players. But yeah, with having Laugh at 2 million and Shesterkin at 6 million, if they can both continue the trajectory that they're on, having great years, they're gonna have big paydays in their future. And so yeah, it is win now mode for them right now.
Looking at their roster up and down and the prospects they have, the ones you wrote, Brennan Othman, Gabe Perreault, and drafting EJ Emery, even Capo Caco, with the track record the Rangers have of developing prospects, would you like to see them trade some of these guys for an impact roster player, or would you rather see them stand pat and hold on to these prospects?
Yeah, obviously they've had a pretty bad track record of developing guys. Lafreniere has been really slow. Kako still hasn't broken out. I would love to see a Kako deal. I think just the offers haven't been good enough for him, but I think he could bring in some pretty good, valuable pieces. And looking at Perreault and Othman, I think that's two very similar winger type players. So I would like to see them maybe move on from one of them. I would err on the side of keeping Gabe Perreault. I think he was a steal picked. I think he was like 22nd or 23rd overall. Maybe move on from Othman, just a little bit older, a little bit slower in development. And yeah, like you said, bring in a big roster piece and help them go for a cup run at this time by the deadline. Yeah, guys, that about wraps up our Metro Division outlook. Seems like we're both agreed on the top four being Rangers, Devils, Hurricanes, and Capitals. No particular order there, but that's who we see making the playoffs. Let us know what you guys think, whether you disagree or agree. That wraps up all divisions that we've looked at so far. So starting in a couple weeks, we're going to have a brand new content, a bunch of fun stuff to do. So a lot of off-season stuff. It's going to be fun. And until then, guys, take care, and we'll see you soon.
My flower, you really thought she would be sweet. It's a whole nother level of sour. 100 Batman.